Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Parks and Clean Water for Everyone, a special briefing on the recently enacted New York State fiscal year 2023 budget. I'm Andy Bicking, Director of Government Relations and Public Policy for Scenic Hudson and your MC for this morning's event. Today's webinar will last an hour and conclude at 11:30 a.m. We'll be hearing introductory remarks from Scenic Hudson President Ned Sullivan, followed by State Parks Commissioner Erik Kulleseid's presentation about the historic investments in parks and environmental priorities outlined in this year's state budget. I'm sure you will share my appreciation and commitment by the Governor and the Commissioner to bring this important information to you and also bring it to you in an accessible and COVID-safe format. Following the presentation, Commissioner Kulleseid will take your questions. Please post them in the Q&A and I will read them aloud in the order in which they are received. And if you'd like to post about this event on social media, please feel free to use the hashtag NYBondAct and NYEnviroFund. If you're on Twitter, don't forget to tag New York State Parks and Scenic Hudson. I believe most of the participants in the meeting today have some knowledge of the state budget process, but here's a quick recap. Each year, our governor proposes New York State's budget. The proposal is evaluated by the state legislature, and the Assembly and Senate and governor then enter into three-way negotiations to finalize the budget by April. From here, state agencies administer the funds and direct them to their intended purposes. In the late summer and early fall, agencies begin their budgets for the next fiscal year. This year's budget contains an amazingly strong financial commitment to programs that will benefit the Hudson Valley and New York State, including the Parks Capital Fund, Environmental Protection Fund, and the nation-leading Clean Air, Clean Water, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act. We'll be hearing about these from Ned and Erik in the presentation. But now it's my pleasure to introduce Scenic Hudson's president, Ned Sullivan, who will share some introductory remarks. Ned?
Thank you, Andy, and great thanks to you and all your team for all you did to achieve the historic New York State environmental budget this year. So Scenic Hudson preserves land and farms and creates parks that connect people with the inspirational power of the Hudson River, while fighting threats to the river and natural resources that are the foundation of the Hudson Valley's prosperity. So just a few weeks ago on Earth Day weekend, almost 500 people celebrated the opening of Sojourner Truth State Park along the Hudson River in the city of Kingston. Working with the State Office of Parks, the Kulleseid Interstate Park Commission, the city of Kingston, community members, and other partners, we transformed this 520-acre property into a spectacular place for all people to enjoy the bounty of nature. Once scarred by over a century of mining and industrial operations, a mile-long waterfront trail, quarry ponds, and clifftop views make this now an extraordinary destination that is open to the public. And this demonstrates what can happen when we all work together toward a common vision with a public-private partnership and the financial resources to make it happen. Since Harriman State Park was founded in 1910 as the first state park in New York and the nation, one of the first in the nation, as well as a precursor to the national park system, New York has been a leader in conservation and park creation. Under Governor Hochul's leadership, this year's environmental budget has made a major unprecedented commitment to our spectacular statewide park system, while also boosting the Environmental Protection Fund and the Clean Water Infrastructure Funds to historic levels, really historic. And the 4.2 Environmental Bond Act that will be on the ballot in November provides an opportunity to dramatically increase our collective capacity to do this work. So I urge everyone listening today to pay close attention to the Bond Act proposal. It's not yet a done deal because voters must be educated and mobilized about the proposal, and You'll be hearing more about it from Scenic Hudson and our partners in the months ahead as we seek to achieve its approval in November. So I'd like to personally thank Governor Hochul for her leadership and commitment to being the greatest parks governor of all time in New York. And I salute Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, both of whom provided critical leadership to pass this historic budget. And Senate Leader Stewart-Cousins and Hudson Valley Senator Skoufis played pivotal roles as champions of the State Parks Capital Fund. So I'd like to share two quick examples of projects that will be funded in part through this year's budget. In a collaboration of Westchester County and the governor and our legislative leaders, we now have all the funds needed to perform the environmental review and permitting of the extension of the Westchester Riverwalk under the Mario Cuomo Bridge in Westchester. Once complete, this will enable people to walk or ride bikes to the Tarrytown Metro North train station, while also connecting residents and visitors to the world-class historic sites in that area along the Westchester waterfront. And I particularly want to thank Governor Hochul for making this a state of the state initiative and proposing that the funds for this environmental review and permitting that will be supplemented with funds provided by County Executive Latimer of Westchester. Another example of a great collaboration that's a work in progress made possible by state resources in conjunction with private capital is the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail. As many of you know, Breakneck Ridge in the Hudson Highlands is one of the most popular day hikes in America. However, it is also the site of longstanding safety and access issues. The popularity of this destination has come with significant traffic hazards that have resulted in injuries and even fatalities due to the convergence of hikers parking their cars along the side of the road, hundreds of Metro North passengers streaming off trains, and through drivers on Route 9D. Additionally, there's a New York City Department of Environmental Protection aqueduct facility right there in this location. And this plays a critical role in the transport of drinking water. Some 40% of New York City's drinking water passes through this point on its way to New York. But it is currently inaccessible by vehicles for DEP service. So funding from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, private donations, and the Parks Capital Fund will help resolve many of these safety issues, and particularly go to building a bridge over the railroad tracks at this point, providing safe access for hikers and bicyclists, and also allowing the New York City Department of Environmental Protection to do a once in a many generation upgrade of this crucial piece of infrastructure. So just a quick comment on the Bond Act. If passed in November, this would provide funding to advance construction of many crucial environmental priorities across the state, including a new wave of state investment in Sojourner State Park, Sojourner Truth State Park in Kingston, new access along the northern reaches of the Hudson River, and help create green in our cities to make them more resilient to our changing climate. There's lots of evidence that projects like these have a positive return on the investment in local communities. Some $7 for every dollar of state money invested at the local level. So I'm thrilled that the New York State budget allocated funding to these initiatives that will bolster the Hudson Valley's tourism economy, help advance environmental justice and equity throughout the region. So we at Scenic Hudson are so excited to have these funds to continue our great partnership with Commissioner Kulleseid and his great team at OPRHB, the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, to make sure that the budgeted funding benefits the health and well-being of the environment, the people and wildlife that rely on these resources. So Commissioner Kulleseid has a long and stellar track record in parks creation and land preservation. He worked for the Open Space Institute in senior positions at the Parks Department, as well as at the Trust for Public Lands. He led the state team that oversaw the successful public-private partnership that opened up Walkway Over the Hudson as a quadricentennial project, and many other transformative projects across New York State. Parks are in his blood, and with the rest of his staff, he's a great partner in land preservation, park creation, and stewardship. So Commissioner Kulleseid, I welcome and thank you for your partnership.
So I thank you, Ned, and thank you for those kind words. And that it sort of, you just all you have to do is look at those projects you highlighted, Sojourner Truth and Riverwalk and Hudson Fjord to really see what a great partner you are for us, and how we are able to play at a different level, really play at a higher level in the recreation game because of groups like you and your incredible leadership here. And thank you for inviting me to make this presentation today and to represent Governor Hochul, and who is really the author of so much of what's in this budget. So I think, so I'm going to return. So in terms of sort of the outline here, I'm going to start with sort of the general provisions in the budget, just to run through some of those, the top lines. They're sort of the headlines in the budget. And then I'll circle back and dig in a little more deeply into the subjects that Ned talked about, which was the Bond Act and the Environmental Protection Fund, and our very own capital budget, which we are incredibly excited about. As you may know, the budget that finally arrived was a $221 billion budget. This is an exceptional year for the state. We have the advantage of some higher than expected tax revenues, federal dollars that are enabling the state to both make major investments in the environment and other programs, at the same time as being fiscally prudent. And I think it's important for everyone to note that even as we all revel, many agencies, we'll talk through it, revel through record funding, it is really largely investments we're making. These are not adding one-time costs to state government. It's really, these are efforts to make sure that we are spending money responsibly. Hudson Valley taxpayers should be happy that through acceleration of the tax reductions, Hudson Valley taxpayers, 632,000 of them, will be getting paying less money in taxes, which should be good news. That's really a reduction that's been accelerated in this budget. Part of that is homeowner tax relief, which is again coming back to homeowners to enable us to stay in our homes. Obviously, the housing crisis continues, and so this is important for maintaining sort of that homeowner base in the Hudson Valley. There's also obviously everyone realizes that COVID was expensive, so there's money coming back in to help cover the costs of those expenses. School, obviously, one of the biggest items in the state budget is support for schools, and you'll see the Hudson Valley schools. We'll expect to see a large increase in funding to allow them to go carry out those crucial programs that the state funds. It's very exciting, and it's a huge opportunity for our schools to be investing. That's really the theme throughout. It's all about investment. So more money to do full day pre-kindergarten. That obviously helps parents of young children, people who are working. It helps working families. Huge benefits to the population. We are also, you may remember, so the state's already generous in terms of the tuition it pays. So if you're going to school in state, and from now on that'll also apply to part-time students. So it's not just it's people who have jobs don't have to forego the aid. They can also get aid for their education. More money for childcare. Again, childcare is a huge issue towards having a working population. Continuing to invest in downtowns. A lot of that, we actually have a historic preservation tax credit that helps with that, but it's also again about making jobs more accessible and easier to get to. There's also, I think it's widely known that we have a housing crisis in this state and in this country, And so the governor's plan, the adopted budget, I shouldn't say the governor's plan, is with everybody. Plans for 100,000 new housing units to be developed under a 5-year plan to help alleviate the housing crisis we have in the state. We also need to have workforce development. Again, large, nice capital for that to help get people on the job and give people training. And then for those of us who drive, which is most of us, the DOT capital plan is a large increase to allow the DOT to address the arteries that promote commerce. Obviously, looking to a greener future there in terms of emissions, but with the transportation is still a huge part of the state's economy. Healthcare coming out of COVID, healthcare needed to be invested in. Healthcare infrastructure was stressed to the breaking point. And the governor had already proposed 1.2 billion for healthcare workers. Now there's also a corresponding assistance to raise the pay for home care workers, home healthcare workers needed this relief. And so it's great to see the governor and the legislature coming together on this to help support those people, which is an important part of the health economy. As we all know, the drug opioid addiction and others are scourges on this country, and we need to keep investing. And the Mid-Hudson Valley is not immune from that. And so there's money in to support those kinds of programs. And then obviously one of the big things New York continues to be a leader in the face of federal wishy-washiness, I guess I'll say, to other states to continue to look at gun violence. We have to, the gun violence is on the increase. We need to be addressing this. And so there's requiring this infrastructure in communities to help avoid gun violence and make sure our cities and our continue to be thriving places where people can feel safe and live their life. This topic about the reforms to the bail reform, or I should say follow-up reforms to the bail reform that was passed a few years ago. This was obviously a lot in the news. And really what we're doing is there were clearly some places that needed tweaking in the bail reform law that was passed a few years ago. And so I think the basic thrust here is to give judges more flexibility to consider certain factors when setting bail, to really to make sure we're addressing repeat offenders, gun trafficking, and more resources for district attorneys who are working with new discovery laws. And so this was obviously something that was worked on to the very final moments of the budget, and we are extremely pleased that the governor and the legislature were able to come down around this and continue to make New York a leader in the way we deal with crime and addressing crime and trying to stop it before it happens. And so this is just more of our effort to address gun violence. So now we get into what Ned was talking about, and Ned is, as Ned said, there is the legislature and the governor came to agreement on a $4.2 billion bond act that is that was $1.2 billion more than the proposal that was on the table in 2020 that was pulled because of concerns about COVID. And that bond act is really about a number of things, right? To get us to enable us to adapt, be resilient, and mitigate the effects of decades of fossil fuel economy. And there's some interesting big buckets here that I think are important to note. For one of them, obviously, is that it's disadvantaged environmental justice communities where where the effects of climate change and pollution and other environmental ills are most acutely felt. And so the target of the Bond Act is to make sure that at least 35%, if not 40% of those funds are spent in communities that have been particularly impacted by climate change and pollution. And so you're going to see mitigation, obvious things like improving culverts, improving drainages, making so that our infrastructure is more sound, but also so that our infrastructure is better able to survive storm. We also are looking at places like restoring wetlands, flood risk reduction, trying to do things to reduce the risk of climate change. Obviously, climate change in New York is a lot about floods. It's less about dryness so far anyway, than about water and all the water that's coming at us. And so there's a big bucket for that. More water quality improvements. So that's about making sure our treatment facilities and we're able to have cleaner water being released from our lands into our streams and waterways. And then a big chunk, 650 million for open space, land conservation and recreation. And that is obviously a big chunk of what this agency hopes to avail itself of. Recreation. This Ned referred to the Sojourner Truth. I think that's on my next slide. Yes, that's the kind of benefit money it put in Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth is actually a perfect example of a reclamation project, really, because it is a former. You don't get more deteriorated. You don't get more impacted landscapes than Sojourner Truth because it was a quarry, and now we are in the process of recovering that and restoring as part of a vital functioning ecosystem. So that's a tremendous. It's a tremendous a mile-long river waterfront that is now open to the public rather than closed off behind a quarry. Other items under this category under the Bond Act include, so there's 300 million for open space conservation and recreation. That's land acquisition, obviously, of course, which Scenic Hudson and many other groups work with. Farmland preservation, again, actually a Scenic Hudson thing, along with other groups. Fish hatcheries, 75 million, other eligibles. And then for the state parks, in particular, we see improvements to parks, campgrounds, fish hatcheries, dams, other recreational facilities. And as Ned mentioned, it's an opportunity for us to build out Sojourner Truth State Park and make it more accessible to the public, and also to continue to advance what we call Hudson Eagle State Recreation Area, which is a set of boat launches and waterfront parks knit together along the upper Hudson, between Hudson and Albany. What you're seeing here is the train station or the waterfront in Hudson, where we are planning a major overhaul to a boat launch there. And we are actually just about to launch next spring to open, not next spring, next week or the next 2 weeks, the totally overhauled boat launch at Kulleseid. So it's an effort to take this part of the Hudson River and make it into a destination for boating traffic, for transient boaters to really increase the profile of this, what is a spectacular stretch of the Hudson River. As Ned mentioned, we are looking at a historic, really, there's nothing less than historic state parks capital program, $250 million. It is game changing. This allows us, we've been benefited from enormous amounts of capital in the last 10 years, strong capital, I should say, in the last 10 years, which allowed us to take on some of our signature flagship parks like Niagara Falls and Jones Beach. But it did not give us the kind of funding we needed to be able to continue to make those improvements to address really decades of underinvestment in our parks, particularly many of them in the Hudson Valley. And I'm talking about Bear Mountain and Harriman. We'll get to that in a second. But the funding also puts us in great position to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the State Parks Act of 1924, which is the seminal legislation that really put together the system that we know today. It knit together a whole lot of regional park commissions and created a statewide whole, which we're looking forward to, and looking forward to celebrating with all of our partners, including Scenic Hudson and others, as we go. And I'll say this photo is from the opening day of Sojourner Truth. Really just shows the joy all around on the day of that great opening in Kingston. So again, highlights for the Hudson Valley in terms of the money, the $250 million in capital. We are looking at transforming Bear Mountain State Park. Bear Mountain State Park is increasingly popular. It is a place that gets packed on weekends all the time. It actually happens to have greater capacity because there's actually lots of open space. So we're going to do more picnic areas to allow Bear Mountain to welcome more people. We are actually going to begin design development in Sojourner Truth State Park. We are looking at Olana. We are working with Olana on a potential new visitor center at the south entrance to Olana. Harriman group camps. If you've been to Harriman is laced with group camps, 30 group camps, and they provide a vital service to underserved, underprivileged youth This is a way to revitalize them. They need this kind of investment. Lake Sebago Beach, we're looking at, which closed after Tropical Storm Lee and Irene, that double whammo back in 2011. We need to get that back open. It seems the wrong way to go in today's world where COVID showed how important the parks are. The wrong way to go is to be shutting down facilities, and so we need to get that back open, but it's not a cheap project, and so the funding will allow us to really advance designs there dramatically. And of course, then, as Ned noted, the 250 allows us to make a $20 million state investment in Hudson Fjord Trail. And the great thing there is, we expect to see work happening there as early as this fall. So that's very exciting that this project, again, as Ned noted, to increase safety, but and access to one of the most dramatic viewpoints and scenic vistas in the Hudson Valley and in the entire state, really, is going to happen through this park. And we are very excited to be partnering with Scenic Hudson on this. We are also looking at a $400 million environmental protection fund. That's a 100 million. That's also a record amount, 100 million more than last year. Ned mentioned the Riverwalk project, the environmental work that's going to be funded out of that through a grants program this agency runs. The EVF for us also has great programs like Connect Kids, which helps kids from distressed communities to visit public lands. We pay transportation, we pay for programming. It's a really very exciting project because you know what? We need to create the next generation of stewards, and we need to make sure that the next generation of stewards reflects the population of the entire state and not just a certain community or another. So it's very, very exciting. 30% more for grants, and this is a program I think should keep going because this is direct money to local governments and to nonprofits to help them carry out park and historic preservation projects. There's more money for us to take care of our lands, particularly to address invasive species and the kinds of things that plague us. Obviously, we at DEC have got huge issues to do, and we need the help there. We need help to manage that program. 33% more for land acquisition, and then also more funding for a program that gives grants to friends groups at state parks and forests to do projects. It's a sort of a parallel program to the land trust program, which is also, I'm sure, is a vitally important program for the land trust in this state. It's sort of a parallel program to that. So again, just to sort of recap, and again, I'm more than happy to take questions. There is just the highlights are, really all the kind of initiatives we need to have in order to make sure that New York continues to be a leader. And I think that's the exciting thing about New York right now is I think we are in leadership position. We are doing things around this, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. We are doing amazing things in this state, and this budget allows us to keep going. We are grateful to Scenic Hudson for that, and grateful to all of our partners. And I'm open to any questions tonight. And I also just want to also note, Ned, I was pleased to see Pete Lopez on the train this morning, meet him yesterday. You've got some great new staff there and really been doing a great job of strengthening the hand of the environment in the legislature. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Great presentation.
I'm going to stop sharing, I think. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you, Ned. And just an open comment to everyone who's participating today. Thank you for a couple of your recent comments in the chat. I'd like to encourage everyone to use the Q&A feature that's available at the bottom center of most Zoom screens, I believe. It would be a lot easier on us just to keep track of your comments and make sure that everyone gets an answer to their questions. So please use the Q&A feature to post any questions that you have for Ned or the Commissioner or the state budget process. I see that there's already been a few comments made about some municipal interest in waterfront parks, and I think that is really a good segue to our Q&A period, and a question that I frequently hear a lot when I'm speaking to municipal and community leaders. And that is really from a local perspective, Commissioner Ned, it is sometimes hard to find the capacity to apply for the many great state funds that are available and grant resources. So I'm curious, on behalf of many of our participants today, what kinds of resources or technical support or services can state agency staff or nonprofit staff offer to help community partners apply for some of these funds and get to the point where they've got successful projects on the ground?
So I'll take a first cut at that. So I would just say thanks, Andy, for that. And now is the opening, the season for what we call the consolidated funding application, right? Which is the overall grant pool that is applied for every year is open now. I would say as a first step, anyone interested in one of those grants should make sure that they attend the workshops that will be happening around the state. Those workshops help to give you a guidelines for getting through those. Obviously, we have grant staff. We're not rich in grant staff, but we have people on staff who are available to guide people through those hoops. Obviously, our grants are huge. They're great starting points for communities because we are often agreed to be the first money in. And it gets people jump started for then fundraising campaigns, but there are consultants out there to help with it. But I advise you talk to our grant officers, go to these workshops, get yourself oriented to them. But they are because they are such vital grants, because they're so highly sought. There is a certain amount of paperwork that you can't really avoid. I will say that.
No, thank you, Commissioner. And I guess a follow-up question, Ned, this one might be best suited for you, but Scenic Hudson is in a position of convening a lot of people, over its long history, people throughout the valley to get great things happening on the ground. I'm wondering, from your vantage point, understanding the diversity of mission and size and capacity of many local partners interested in state funding, do you have any advice for people for how they can convene partnerships and bring together the stakeholders that are necessary to get projects to successful completion?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. You're right. Scenic Hudson has been a convener, but also a team member of many public-private partnerships throughout the valley. Any project that we're involved in absolutely depends on municipal leadership and the active participation of community members. The Brickyard Trail along the Kingston waterfront now at Sojourner State Park is a great example where a grant that was originally sought by a developer went to the city of Kingston. And when Scenic Hudson first acquired the property, Mayor Noble said, let's move this project along, and partnered with Scenic Hudson and Parks to implement creation of the Hudson River Brickyard Trail, which was open many months before the state park itself. So that kind of local leadership by the mayor is crucial. But I think having a vision, assessing what kind of community asset a property or a project could entail, and getting lots of public input, making sure the public is engaged at every step, casting a broad net for organizations, whether it's our partner organizations like Riverkeeper or Clearwater or other land trusts could help advance a project, making sure there's sound science behind any project and good design. I think those are the ingredients for a successful project. And I'm honored to serve on the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council. And those are the kinds of things that we look for in projects: great partnerships, a strong vision, good environmental and engineering design, and community engagement.
Thanks, Ned. So we have a couple questions coming in from the chat right now. This one, I'll give this to you in a two-part question, Erik. the question is, what other state parks will be benefiting from the investments in the Parks Capital Fund? The person asking the question was specifically interested in James Baird State Park as one of their favorite places. And the other side of the question is from a local partner interested in actually where they can find information about the upcoming grant workshops where state agency staff kind of walk partners through the steps to apply for Environmental Protection Fund dollars.
Thanks, Andy. So the answer to the first question there is that I obviously highlighted sort of the big ticket items, and there are other big ticket items around the state. We need to finish up Jones Beach. There are some. We are finishing up a new visitor center at Niagara Falls. We have lots of big projects going on, but you know, I think it's actually interesting. I'm glad you raised the question because I think one of the abiding interests of this administration, the local administration, is that it's important to do these signature projects, but it's also really vitally important to do the sort of basic infrastructure projects, the water systems, the water treatment systems, the buildings, the bathrooms, all these kinds of projects that really are in people's backyards and are important to people who use our local parks, like James Baird, right, with its great golf course and the work we've done there to improve that place in the recent years. So yes, I can't tell you exactly where money will get spent at James Baird, but James Baird is the type of place, yes, we will be putting infrastructure money because we have a large system. It's one of the most heavily developed in the country, if not the most heavily developed in terms of facilities. And so, yes, we need to continue to make the kind of investments in the smaller parks and not just the large, huge impact ones. And then on the second thing, the grants workshops, I think the place to go really is our website. If you go to our website and look up grants, they should have the schedule there. That's it for our grants anyway. I can't speak for if you're going in for economic development grants or other things, but our grants are all outlined on our website, and you should be able to then pull up a schedule. If not, we will just get in touch with Scenic Hudson and we'll get that for you. But it really is coming up very soon. We're sort of entering the peak season for those workshops.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. And it just reminds me that we will be following up with every participant today. And if there's any unanswered questions, we can certainly address them at that time, but we'll make a note to include that link to the parks website so folks can see where those grant workshops are going to be held. You know, something you said, Commissioner, was really kind of intriguing to me. You know, it was this reference to local parks that you made. And I remember when the state legislature was looking at the state budget and kind of figuring out what their response to the governor would be, one of the issues that came up is that visitation to local parks, you know, peaked significantly during the pandemic. And of course it did for statewide parks as well, but I think there was a real renewed interest in folks just getting outside and being able to walk down the street to their local playground or swing set or whatever resources they had locally and appreciating them. So it kind of brings to mind a little bit of almost a philosophical question about what the connection is between some of these local parks and some of these big picture intense infrastructure investments that are creating brand new sites, and how local communities in kind of their planning and their work on this front, how they can connect to some of those broader themes and policy and some of those bigger level investments. I'm thinking of things like the Empire State Trail that's been so successful, and we also have many local trails. Do you have any thoughts on how local communities can connect to some of those statewide resources?
Well, just so, yeah, and I think, you know, the main way we impact that is, like you said, through our matching grant program, right? And those matching grant programs are 50% grants for a lot of projects, 75% if you meet sort of demographic criteria, you know, income census block criteria, you can get 75% grant funding. They've been typically capped at $500,000. I personally would love to see this pool increase over time so that we can really address some of the bigger projects. We have a nice 30% increase right now. I think it's great because it's going to allow us to rethink and maybe fund put some higher caps on a select number of projects. But I think that, but in terms of the Empire State Trail directly, actually, I think that this year linkages, projects that link to the Empire State Trail are a priority of mine. So those will actually get extra points looking forward to seeing proposals for people that tie into that vital piece of new recreational infrastructure in the state. But I think, generally we try and outline themes that make sense from a broader perspective, climate change, because it's important, even though these are very place-based and very locally oriented, they are all part of a larger perspective. And I noticed actually, Andy, one of the questions about, I see one of the questions about, can money go towards, migrating away from sea level rise, and that is absolutely the case. For land, the acquisition of land for open space purposes, it protects our communities from sea level rise, all very much eligible for this grant pool.
Well, thank you. And Commissioner, you mentioned climate change, and I think that's something that's probably on the minds of many local governments and community groups as we think about how to deploy resources in this year's budget. And I know it's a major priority of the governors and of yours to address climate change. And Ned, I know you've also been very involved in serving on one of the advisory panels to the state's Climate Action Council. So I'm wondering if the two of you could, comment on any opportunities you see to advance the state's climate objectives and goals through the state budget or through the upcoming Bond Act.
You want to go first, Ned? Or you want me to go first? I'll just say that obviously, I think I mentioned earlier, for us, we are such a prominent part of kind of the environment for New Yorkers, right? We're the place where people go to recreate. So we have a huge opportunity to model the best behavior. And so in climate change, yes, I mean, we are, and we also, but like I said, we have a high energy use system. There's a lot of buildings. And so we need to be on the forefront. We have a plan to put more solar in. We'd like to get all of our power from non-renewable sources by 2035. So we are in the process trying to get even ahead of the state on that, putting electric vehicle charging stations. These are things that we're funding with our own budget, but also definitely can come out of the Environmental Bond Act. So, but I think through parks, because we get such high visitation, there's a huge opportunity to educate the public and model the best behavior.
Great. So just building on the commissioner's prior remarks, the Environmental Bond Act that will be on the ballot in November has a huge investment in all aspects of climate change mitigation and adaptation. So I think if there's one thing people could do to try to make a major impact on climate change in New York State, it's to educate your neighbors, your friends, your family about the importance of voting on that initiative. Another thing that's in the state budget is additional funding to support farmers who are making the transition from conventional agriculture to what's called regenerative practices. Historically, conventional agriculture can be a major source of greenhouse gases that exacerbate climate change, but there are practices originally implemented by indigenous people that are recognized now as keeping carbon in the soil, keeping methane in the ground, and not allowing it to become a greenhouse gas, and other precursors or other ingredients to climate change. So the governor's proposed budget and then the ultimate budget included substantial new money to help farmers who are making that transition. And New York is a major agricultural state. The Hudson Valley is considered New York City's breadbasket, and has fruits and vegetables and the farm stands that we all enjoy. The farms behind those can be part of the solution, and in fact can even take greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and reduce the problem. So I think it's a great opportunity. We want to be part of the spreading of the word. We've created an organization called the Northeast Carbon Alliance, whose mission is to make sure that the regenerative practices are known to farmers and that they get the technical assistance they need to make that shift. Right now, the New York State's scoping plan for implementation of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is open for public comment. And so I'd really encourage people to take advantage of that. There is a public meeting coming up in Peekskill. Andy, maybe you know the date of that. And if not, we could distribute it afterwards, where people can comment on the proposals that have been put forward, not just in agriculture, but in moving to renewable energy and other important steps to stop climate change.
Yeah, thank you both for your answers. And Ned, the event you're speaking about is going to be on the 12th of this month, in just a day or so. It is going to be in Peekskill. It's one of the regional hearings on the climate action kind of scoping plan. So a wonderful opportunity for people to turn out and share their perspective. They can do that in writing at the event if they sign up. As I understand, the event will begin around 4 p.m. and additional details are on the Climate Action Council's website. We've been talking a lot about, big picture parks and water investments, Ned and Commissioner, but so much of the brunt of climate change is also going to hit our urban communities. And, here in the Hudson Valley, we have a lot of small to mid-sized cities ranging from the fourth largest city in Yonkers to much smaller communities, but still very urban environments that experience a lot of the similar urban issues. Places like Kingston, Peekskill, Newburgh, Beacon, Poughkeepsie, and more, Hudson. And I'm wondering if both of you could comment a little bit on some of the urban strategies that we should be thinking about to respond to climate change. And again, if there's any kind of direct connections, the grant categories and the budget that we could make people aware of this year.
I think Scenic Hudson in many ways is more experienced in this than Parks does. I think obviously you're looking at water quality, infrastructure, right? A lot of that's about infrastructure, right? It's about managing these combined sewage over CSOs, combined sewage systems, doing things to so that our treatment systems are not overwhelmed by rain events. Obviously, a signature item for us, right, is our rain events and infrastructure because of infrastructure put at risk because of sea level rise. So, those kinds of funds, those kind of Bond Act funds, I think are sort of critical assets or critical resources for cities in densely populated areas in the Hudson Valley and around the state. But Scenic Hudson, you all have done extraordinary stuff with daylighting and other things that speaks to sort of the possibilities in urban areas. And Ned, you're actually way at the head of the pack and all that.
Well, again, these are great partnership projects like the daylighting of the Sawmill River in Yonkers. But in places like Poughkeepsie, in Newburgh, we're working with local partners, with the cities, the mayors themselves, with other partner organizations on the ground. And our approach is to go in and first listen and find out what projects are of importance and interest to the residents there, the people who live there and whose neighborhoods are affected. We know that many areas, many neighborhoods in our urban areas have historically been redlined. And we want to be sure that those areas have the opportunity to plant trees and that we can support them, and there could be other resources that are brought to bear to reduce the heat island effect. We know that areas with green space and tree cover and parks have significantly lower temperatures and other health benefits, health and safety benefits for the residents. So anything that we can do to ensure that those goals of the Bond Act and of other state programs to help the areas that have historically been underserved and that have people in lower income brackets tend to be more diverse, that have historically been cut out of the benefits of programs. They need to get their fair share at this point. And we're very committed to that and working in Newburgh and other cities. Newburgh's was mentioned. Someone in the chat asked, are there resources? We want to be sure that those cities get access to those state funds for these types of projects.
Thanks, Ned. Just a quick reminder to our guests today that if you have any final questions, please put them into the Q&A. We've just got a few moments left and would love to make sure that we get to any comments or questions that you have. We will be sending a follow-up email to everyone here to make sure that they have, some of the basic information, future opportunities for engagement that we spoke about, upcoming hearings in the Climate Action Council, draft scoping plan, and a summary of the budget materials presented today. So we will be sure to get to that. At this point, are there any other questions that folks might have? We'll give it just a moment and then we'll wrap up and conclude for the morning. I should say, Commissioner Ned, did you have any final words you'd like to share in conclusion today?
I would just say again, it's an exceptional year. I think we're on the verge of putting the state park system on a different platform, and we certainly, as an agency, appreciate the advocacy and the work that's been done by a lot of people, by Scenic Hudson and others on our behalf. And we're also obviously so excited to be with Governor Hochul as she sets up and establishes her own legacy in and around parks. And I think she is going to be the parks governor we all remember for generations. And so very excited to be part of that.
No, thank you. Thanks you, Commissioner, for your leadership and partnership. We salute the governor, Leader Stuart Cousins, and Speaker Hasty. It was really clear throughout this budget process, the environment, the parks, climate change were top priorities. So I think that's really exciting, and an opportunity for people throughout the Hudson Valley and throughout the state now to take advantage of these resources. Look for those partnership opportunities in your community. Look for engaging with your elected officials and making sure that they are aligned and working with other organizations to advance projects that are going to achieve your vision for your community and your waterfront. So great thanks to everybody who helped put together this program, and the behind the scenes team members of Scenic Hudson, Parks, and the governor's office.
Yep. Shout out to Pavan Naidu. Hey, Pavan.
Very good. Well, thank you all for a great program today, and really appreciate everyone's time and attention. Commissioner, thank you for joining us and sharing your summary of the budget. Really insightful. So again, we'll be following up with an email to everyone to kind of provide some of the resources and information that was requested during the program. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great afternoon.